Hi everybody, welcome to the Sinister Story Hour. I'm your host, Steph. Thank you for joining me. Every week we dive into a new case of something true crime, cults, paranormal experiences, conspiracies, or anything else sinister. So join me as we delve into each case, and I hope you find it as fascinating as I do. Hey guys, have you thought about making your own podcast, but you're not really sure where to start? That's how I was at first, and really the only choice that stood out to me was Anchor. And let me tell you why. It was completely free to start, and it has all the tools that allow me to record and edit my podcast right from my phone or computer. And they distribute the podcast for me, so it's heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many other platforms. There's no minimum listenership, and you can start making money from day one. And really everything you need to make your podcast is all in one place. I love it, and I know you will too. So download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Hi everybody, welcome to the Sinister Story Hour with Steph. Thank you for joining me for another Sinister story. Before we get into that, I just wanted to let you know we are on pretty much everywhere that you can find. TikTok, we are at Sinister Story Hour, Podchaser, Instagram as well at Sinister Story Hour, Twitter at Sinister Hour, and you can also buy me a coffee. So if you are enjoying the podcast, you can help keep me caffeinated and keep me going. So go on to buy me a coffee and please support that if you would like to. I think that's all the business that I have, and we will get into our story. Tonight's story is about Randall Brent Woodfield, who was born on December 26th of 1950. He preferred to be called Randy, which is normally I would not care what the perpetrator prefers to be called, but in this case, it works and it's easy, so we're going to probably refer to him as Randy for most of the story. Now, growing up, Randy had a pretty normal life. He grew up in Otter Rock, Oregon, with two older sisters. His dad was a manager with the local phone company. His mom was a stay-at-home mom. Seemed like a pretty normal childhood back in the 50s. He attended high school, and he was a great athlete. His dad really pushed him into sports, and it was pretty much a big deal that he had to play sports, and so his father just kind of pushed him in that direction. And so he did play football, basketball, and ran track. During his teenage years, he started having some deviant behaviors. So he would start exposing himself to local girls on a bridge in their town. And he was actually apprehended for it at one time, but nothing really came of it because even though everybody knew that it had happened, his coaches kind of wanted it to be swept under the rug so that he could continue playing football. So that's exactly what happened. It kind of got kept a secret, but he would become known by his peers as kind of a peeping Tom. Now, when he turned 18, his record was expunged, and so there really wasn't any proof of this happening at any point before he turned 18. Randy graduated in 1969. He goes on to attend college in Ontario, Oregon. And while he was at college, his behavior escalated. So he's out on his own. He's around all of these new people, and his behavior just seems to get a little bit more intense all the time. He is actually arrested at one point for ransacking his girlfriend's apartment. And it was an ex-girlfriend, I believe, at the time. But there was a lack of evidence to that, and once again, it results in him facing absolutely no consequences and him feeling even more invincible. Randy actually transferred to Portland University, where he played football as a wide receiver. At Portland University, he actively joined the group Campus Crusade for Christ, which is ironic, and I'm not really sure how to feel about it. I think in a lot of ways it could have done him a lot of good, but in some ways I feel like he was just joining it to look like a nice guy while he was being a sick puke. But, you pick. Now, he doesn't really quite fit in anywhere, no matter what group of people he's with, and one of his former teammates would claim that he was always making off the wall, out of the blue statements. And they all thought he was somewhat of a religious freak, which kind of makes me laugh a little bit because he must have been really able to talk the talk of the campus crusade for Christ while he was actually actively still getting caught for indecent exposure. He was actually in trouble for it a number of times while he was at Portland University, and he was convicted twice. Now, even though his teammates claimed he was pretty much just an average football player, Randy gets the break of a lifetime. He is actually drafted into the NFL, and he's drafted by the Green Bay Packers in 1974. A former teammate would say, quote, "He ran really good pass routes, but he just had fair hands and did not like contact," end quote. Now, for a football star, not liking contact is not a good quality to have, so it doesn't seem like he was really into football, but honestly, this is like the chance of a lifetime, right? Now, although it really could have been a big deal, Randy would have a hard time holding down this job as well, and he's actually released by the Packers before the preseason even ends. However, he gets picked up by the Manitowoc Chiefs, and he ends up being dropped by them by the end of the season. While he was playing for both teams, Randy was allegedly involved in at least 10 cases of indecent exposure. Murderpedia does actually claim that he had multiple issues with indecent exposure that did lead to their decision to cut him. Unfortunately, having never actually played a down in the NFL, Randy Woodfield would soon become infamous for a different reason. After Randy is cut, he returns to Portland and his behavior just starts to escalate even more. He still has yet to suffer any real consequence for anything that he's done, for any of the indecent exposure charges, any of these things. So he actually starts holding women at knife point and forcing them to perform oral sex while robbing them. That is horrifying. What a traumatic thing to go through, to be robbed first of all, and then being made to perform oral sex on your robber. That's even more horrifying. Portland law enforcement actually tries a sting operation due to all of the increasing number of sexual assaults in the area, and Randy is quickly apprehended, and while he's in custody, he does admit to police that he has sexual problems, he has some severe impulse control problems, and he has an addiction to steroids. Randy pleads guilty to reduced charges of second-degree robbery. Did you get that? He is sexually assaulting these women, and he gets charged with second-degree robbery and is sentenced to 10 years in the Oregon State Prison. However, he only serves 4 years, and soon he gets out and dedicates even more time and energy to this newfound hobby. This is actually where Randy makes a small jump from sex offender to serial killer. And from his very first murder on, Randy is considered a suspect due to the connections to his victims, and somehow he is able to have so many victims, even though their eyes are on him this whole time. Around 1979, Randy goes on a 2-year robbery spree, holding up gas stations, ice cream parlors, and homes along I-5. A lot of his female victims are sexually assaulted, murdered, or both. He attacked and sodomized a woman in a restaurant bathroom. He attends a 10-year high school reunion, and he reconnects with former classmate Cherie Ayers. In October 1980, she's found brutally raped, stabbed, and bludgeoned to death in her own apartment. In January 1981, he sneaks into an office building and sexually assaults two 20-year-old cleaning women, Sherry Hull and Beth Wilmot. He then shoots both of them in the back of the head, and one of them actually survives and later identifies Randy in a police lineup. In March of 1981, Randy is brought in for questioning. He's indicted for murder along with charges in various other jurisdictions of rape, sodomy, attempted kidnapping, armed robbery, and illegal possession of firearms. A search of his apartment recovers a spent .32 caliber bullet that matches the murder weapon and the same brand of tape he had used to bind his victims. They also find a phone bill that shows he had been up and down the West Coast during the same time frame. So it becomes very obvious that he has girlfriends everywhere, and it becomes very obvious that he also has victims everywhere. In October 1981, Randy was tried in Salem for the murder of Sherry Hull, along with charges of sodomy and attempted murder. Randall was convicted of the murder and sentenced to life in prison, plus an additional 90 years for convictions of other crimes. Randy was then dubbed the I-9 Killer, or the name the I-5 Bandit. Randy has never confessed to these crimes, but he is still spending his days at the Oregon State Penitentiary, and he's now 71 years old. So I would love to hear what you guys think. Do you think he's guilty? I personally do. So let me know what your thoughts are. As always, you can let us know on sinisterstoryhour@gmail.com, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. Find us anywhere and let us know what you think. Thank you for joining me, and have a great week. Bye. Thank you for listening, everybody. We will see you next time on Sinister Story Hour.